A young black man helped an elderly blind gentleman at the airport without knowing who he was the next day. As he opened the door, his hands trembled at the sight of who was standing. There, Jaden took a deep breath as he weaved through the crowded Grand Central Terminal. It was mid-morning, the usual rush hour calming down, but the place was still busy. He kept his head low, hands in the pockets of his worn-out jacket. His backpack hung heavily from his shoulder, a constant reminder of the urgency pressing in his mind. He couldn't afford to be late. Not today. "Excuse me, sorry," he murmured, sidestepping a woman dragging two oversized suitcases. His sneakers scuffed against the ground, the laces barely holding together. He tied them twice already today, each time knowing they'd come loose again. He kept pushing forward, trying to ignore the bustling people around him. The towering walls of Grand Central made him feel even smaller. Jaden was on his way to a job interview, the only lead he'd had in weeks. He needed this job more than anything. His mom was at home, lying in bed, growing weaker by the day. The mounting medical bills were suffocating them, and every no he received in interviews felt like another stone added to the weight. Crushing his chest, he wasn't sure how much longer they could last, but today was different. It had to be this time. He was going to make it. He glanced up at the massive clock in the middle of the station. He was still on time if he moved fast. Just a few more minutes and he'd be out of the chaos, heading down the street to the building where his interview was scheduled. He adjusted the strap of his backpack and sped up his pace, eyes darting back and forth, trying to make his way through the masses. That's when he saw him. An old man stood near the top of a staircase, his head turning left and right like he was lost. The man had a walking cane, but it was tucked under his arm, not being used. He looked confused, almost helpless, and people just rushed by him without a second glance. Jaden could see the man's hand trembling slightly, his eyes squinting at the people passing by. Jaden kept moving, his body wanting to ignore it. He told himself that someone else would help. There had to be somebody else, right? He couldn't stop. He had an interview, and this was his shot to get his mom the help she needed, but he couldn't look away. The man's wrinkled face twisted in confusion, his lips moving slightly as if he were trying to ask someone, anyone, for assistance. Jaden's gut twisted. He paused just for a second before muttering under his breath, "Damn it." He turned around, pushing back against the flow of people, making his way toward the old man. The sound of hurried footsteps and rolling luggage surrounded him. When he finally reached the man, Jaden hesitated before speaking up. "Hey, do you need help?" he asked, his voice louder than usual to be heard over the noise. The old man turned toward Jaden, his eyebrows lifting slightly. There was a flash of relief in his eyes, and he nodded. "Oh, thank you, young man. I can't seem to find my way down these stairs. Everything looks a bit blurry and, well," Jaden nodded, giving a quick glance at his watch. He'd have to move quickly. "No problem. I can help you down." He stepped beside the man, offering his arm. The old man took it cautiously, his fingers bony and cold. Jaden shifted, getting a better grip to make sure the man wouldn't fall. They started down the stairs, step by step. It wasn't easy. The old man, Mr. Thompson, as he introduced himself, moved slowly, his legs shaky. Jaden could feel the eyes of impatient commuters on them as they passed, people sighing or groaning under their breath. A guy bumped Jaden's shoulder roughly as he walked by, muttering something about blocking the way. Jaden ignored him, focusing on Mr. Thompson. "We're almost there. Just keep taking it slow," he said. Mr. Thompson nodded, his lips trembling as he spoke. "I appreciate this. It's just been getting harder lately, and well, I should probably avoid these stairs." "Huh?" Jaden managed a small smile. "Yeah, maybe next time use the elevator, but you're doing good." Almost there. About halfway down, Jaden noticed a security guard staring at them. The guard's gaze was heavy, suspicious, as if Jaden was doing something wrong just by being there. Jaden's heart pounded harder in his chest. He wasn't doing anything bad. He was helping, but that look, he'd seen it before. It always made his stomach twist. He looked away, focusing on the steps in front of them. Step by step, they made it down. Mr. Thompson leaned on Jaden a little more as they got to the last few stairs, his breath shaky, his grip tightening. When they finally reached the bottom, Mr. Thompson let out a long sigh of relief. "Thank you, son. Really, I don't know what I would have done without you." Jaden smiled, a small but genuine smile. "This time, it's no problem. You sure you're okay from here?" Mr. Thompson nodded, though he still looked a bit uncertain. "I'll be fine. Yes, thank you again." Jaden gave a quick nod, releasing his arm gently. He glanced at the clock again. The minutes had slipped by faster than he thought. He was late now, probably too late. "Take care, sir," Jaden said, stepping away. Mr. Thompson gave him a warm, appreciative smile, the kind that lingered even after you looked away. Jaden took a breath and turned back into the crowd, his heart sinking slightly. He still had to try to make it, even if it was a long shot. He moved quickly, weaving through the people, but that knot in his chest was tightening. He knew he'd made the right choice, but that didn't make it any easier. Jaden was running, his heart pounding in sync with each hurried footstep. He weaved through the hallways of the terminal, dodging people who were too absorbed in their own business to notice him rushing by. He kept glancing at his watch. Each tick felt like it screamed, "Too late," louder and louder in his ears. He knew deep down that his chance was slipping away, but he couldn't just let go of it. He had to at least try. Suddenly, a shrill voice snapped him out of his frantic pace. "Hey, you there!" It was a security guard, the same one who had been eyeing him earlier when he was helping Mr. Thompson. Jaden's stomach dropped as he heard the voice. He slowed down. Turning slightly, the guard's look wasn't just suspicious. Now it was sharp, like he was waiting for Jaden to make the wrong move. Jaden stopped, swallowing hard. The guard walked up, frowning. "What were you doing back there?" he asked, eyeing Jaden up and down. Jaden sighed, trying to keep his cool. "I was just helping the old man down the stairs. He needed some help. That's all." The guard narrowed his eyes. "You sure you weren't trying something else?" Jaden's face flushed. "I swear, I was just helping," he said, his voice firmer now, but his hands shook slightly. He could feel the stares of people walking by. He hated this. He hated how no matter what he did, it always seemed like he was guilty of something. The guard looked at him for a long moment before he finally nodded, almost reluctantly. "All right, but watch yourself," he said before walking away. Jaden stood there for a second, taking in a deep breath, feeling the tension ease out of his shoulders just a little. He couldn't let it get to him. Not today. He had to keep moving. He ran out of the terminal, his eyes fixed on the address of the building he needed to get to. As he approached the towering structure, he slowed, chest heaving as he tried to catch his breath. The building's automatic doors opened smoothly, the cool air conditioning washing over him. He jogged to the reception desk, his voice coming out between gasps. "Hi, I'm here for the interview. It was at 10. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with glasses, barely looked up. She shook her head. "I'm sorry. Interviews are over for now." Jaden clenched his jaw, his shoulders dropping. "Please, I got held up helping someone. Is there any way?" She sighed, finally looking up at him. She glanced at the clock, then back at him. Her gaze softened slightly when she saw the desperation in his eyes. "You can try again next week," she said, her voice gentler now. Jaden nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Thank you," he whispered, though it felt hollow. He turned away from the desk, pushing through the heavy disappointment settling in his chest. It wasn't just his opportunity, it was his mom's chance too, for better care, for less stress, and he'd lost it. As he walked back out into the busy street, his hands were shoved deep in his pockets, his head low. He started down the sidewalk, feeling the exhaustion hit him all at once. He had given up his one lead, and for what? But then the memory of Mr. Thompson's shaky smile flashed in his mind, and the way he had genuinely thanked him. Maybe it wasn't all in vain. The honk of a horn pulled him out of his thoughts, and he looked up, realizing he had wandered a bit too far into the street. He quickly stepped back onto the sidewalk, his heart giving a small jolt as he made his way back toward the terminal. A voice called out from behind him. It was Mr. Thompson, the elderly man he had just helped, standing not too far away, leaning against a column. He waved Jaden over, his smile as soft as before. Jaden blinked in surprise. "Mr. Thompson, you're still here?" Mr. Thompson nodded. "I needed to catch my breath. Plus, I was hoping I might see you again before you left," he said, adjusting his glasses, his eyes squinting slightly, still appearing unsure about his surroundings. "Thank you again, young man. It's not every day someone stops to help an old fool like me." Jaden shrugged, scratching the back of his neck. It's nothing, really. Anyone would have done it. Mr. Thompson smiled, shaking his head. Slowly, not just anyone. What's your name, son? Jaden, he replied. Well, Jaden, it's good to meet you, Mr. Thompson said, extending his shaky hand. Jaden took it, giving a firm but respectful handshake. You look like you were in a rush earlier. Did you miss something because of me? Jaden bit his lip, then let out a small laugh that sounded more like a sigh. I mean, yeah, kind of. I had a job interview, but it's no big deal. I can try again. Mr. Thompson's brow furrowed and his grip on his cane tightened. A job interview, you say? And you still help me. That's rare. I'm truly sorry. Jaden shook his head. Don't be. I made the choice. It's not your fault. There was a pause and Mr. Thompson stared at Jaden as if sizing him up. You know, people like you who put others first, you deserve more chances than you get. Jaden gave a weak smile, his eyes dropping. Yeah, maybe. Mr. Thompson seemed like he wanted to say more, but he stopped, a thoughtful look crossing his face. He fished around in his coat pocket and pulled out an old business card. Here, take this, he said, handing it to Jaden. If there's anything I can do, even just a reference, let me know. You deserve it. Jaden took the card, looking at the name, just a simple R. Thompson and a phone number, nothing else fancy. He nodded, slipping it into his pocket. Thanks. I appreciate it, he said, though he doubted it would amount to much. It was a kind gesture, but life rarely gave second chances. Mr. Thompson smiled once more, this time a bit sadly. Well, I best be on my way. You take care of yourself, Jaden. You too, Mr. Thompson, Jaden said, giving a slight wave as he watched the man shuffle slowly away, his cane clicking on the pavement. For a moment, Jaden stood there, staring at the card in his hand before putting it away again. He took a deep breath, then turned around, heading back in the direction of home. The knot in his chest hadn't disappeared, but maybe, just maybe, today hadn't been a total loss. Jaden trudged through the crowded terminal, his steps heavy. The disappointment from missing the interview was like a weight on his shoulders, each step reminding him of what he'd lost. He just wanted to get home, back to his mom, where at least he could feel like he still had a purpose. He reached the entrance of the terminal and noticed Mr. Thompson again. The old man was leaning against a column, his face a bit. Flushed Jaden almost walked past him, but something held him back. He turned, walking back toward Mr. Thompson. Hey, are you? Okay, Jaden asked, his voice carrying a note of concern. Mr. Thompson looked up, a tired smile crossing his face. Ah, Jaden, I didn't expect to see you again. I'm all right. Just a bit tired. These old legs don't carry me as well as they used to. Jaden nodded, stepping closer. Do you need help getting somewhere? Maybe a cab. He didn't really have the money to spare, but the thought of leaving Mr. Thompson here alone didn't sit right with him. Mr. Thompson shook his head. No, I'll manage. Just need a moment to catch my breath. He paused, his eyes studying Jaden for a moment. You look like you could use a break yourself. Did things not go well with that interview? Jaden sighed, running a hand through his short hair. Nah? I was too late. They wouldn't see me. He tried to keep his tone light, but it came out flat, betraying the disappointment. He felt Mr. Thompson frowned, a shadow of sympathy in his expression. I'm really sorry about that. Jaden, you seem like a good kid willing to help someone, even when you had something important to do. Jaden shrugged, trying to dismiss it. It's whatever, there's always next time. I guess the old man leaned more on his cane, still looking at Jaden. You mentioned you were looking for work. What kind of job are you trying to get? Jaden sighed, his shoulders slumping. Anything really. I just need something steady, something that can help with my mom. She's not well, and the bills keep piling up. I've been trying for weeks now, but nothing sticks either. They want someone with experience, or they just don't. Like the look of me, I guess Mr. Thompson's face softened and he nodded. I see that's tough. It's not easy for someone your age, especially with responsibilities like that. Most kids, these days, they don't even think about anyone but themselves. Jaden gave a small humorless laugh. Yeah. Well, I don't have much of a choice. It's just me and my mom. I got to figure something out. The old man fell quiet, his eyes distant, as if he was thinking back to something. After a moment, he cleared his throat. You know, Jaden, I wasn't always as well off as I look now. There was a time when I didn't have much either. I had to fight for every scrap, every opportunity, and it wasn't easy. Jaden looked at Mr. Thompson. Curiosity piqued. Really, you don't look like you've ever had to struggle. Mr. Thompson chuckled softly, shaking his head. Appearances can be deceiving when I was your age. I was working 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. For my family, my dad was gone, and my mom was sick. It's not so different from your story. Really, Jaden blinked, surprised. He hadn't expected this old man to have gone through anything like what he was facing. Now, it made him feel a little less alone, like maybe his struggles weren't unique, but you made it out right. Jaden asked, a hint of hope in his voice. Mr. Thompson smiled faintly. Yeah, I did. But it wasn't because of luck. It was because people helped me along the way. People who saw something in me when I didn't even see it myself. And I think, Jaden, that you've got something worth seeing too. Jaden didn't know what to say to them then they looked down at his shoes. The laces still barely holding on. I don't know, Mr. Thompson. Sometimes it just feels like everything's against me. You know, Mr. Thompson nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. I do know, and I won't pretend it gets easier overnight, but the fact that you stopped to help an old man today when you had your own problems says a lot about you. You have character, son, and that's something not. Everyone has. Jaden swallowed a tight feeling in his throat. Thanks, he mumbled. I wish it was enough. Mr. Thompson reached out, placing a hand on Jaden's shoulder. It is enough, Jaden. You just need someone to give you a chance. And who knows, maybe that chance is closer than you think. Jaden looked up at Mr. Thompson, their eyes meeting. He saw something there, something genuine. For the first time that day, he felt a small flicker of hope. Maybe, Jaden said, nodding. Slowly, maybe they stood there for a moment in silence. The noise of the terminal fading into the background. Jaden didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a while, it didn't feel completely hopeless. Mr. Thompson patted Jaden's shoulder, then stepped back, his grip on his cane firming. I should get going now, but remember, Jaden, don't give up. The world needs more people like you, Jaden nodded. Thanks, Mr. Thompson. I won't forget it. The old man smiled, then turned and started slowly walking away. Jaden watched him go, the shuffle of Mr. Thompson's feet, blending into the noise around him. Jaden reached into his pocket, feeling the business card there. He pulled it out. Looking at the simple text, again, Art Thompson, he didn't know if he'd ever call the number. It was probably just an empty gesture, but maybe, just maybe, there was something to it. With a deep breath, Jaden put the card back in his pocket and turned, making his way out of the terminal. He still had a long way to go, but maybe today hadn't been a complete loss. After all, Jaden woke up to the morning light filtering through the thin curtains in his room. He blinked, trying to shake off the heavy feeling in his chest. Yesterday's events still played over and over in his head. The interview helping Mr. Thompson, the security guard's suspicious glare. He pushed himself out of bed, his muscles aching with every move. He glanced at the clock. 6:30 a.m. The world outside was already starting to wake up. The faint sound of car engines and distant conversations drifting in through the open window. Jaden let out a sigh as he stood up, his eyes drifting to his mother's room. He could hear her coughing, the sound horror and weak. He walked over gently, pushing the door open. Morning, Mom. He said, his voice soft. She was sitting up in bed, a thin blanket pulled around her shoulders. Her face lit up with a tired smile when she saw him. Morning, Jay. She said, her voice barely above a whisper. You're up early. Jaden nodded, sitting on the edge of her bed. Yeah, couldn't really sleep, just thinking about everything. I guess he tried to smile, but it felt forced. His mom reached over, resting a bony hand on his arm. Don't let it get you down, honey. You're doing everything you can. I'm so proud of you. Jaden looked away, swallowing hard. Yeah, but I just keep messing things up. I mean, I missed the interview yesterday. I tried to help this old man, and it was the right thing to do, but now it's like I'm back to square one. His mom squeezed his arm. You helped someone in need. Jay, that's not messing up. That's being a good person. The right opportunities will come. Just keep doing what you're doing. He looked at her, the hope in her eyes, making his chest tighten. He wished he could believe it as easily as she did. He nodded, forcing a smile. Yeah, I guess so. After helping her get comfortable, Jaden made his way to the kitchen. There wasn't much in the fridge. Some bread, a bit of cheese, half a carton of milk. He pulled out what he needed, making a simple breakfast for them. Both the toast popped up slightly burnt, but he didn't have the energy to redo it. He set a small plate on a tray and brought it back to his mom's room, watching as her eyes lit up. "Thank you, Jay," she said, taking the toast with shaky hands. He smiled. "I'll be back in a bit, going to head to the library, see." "If I can find any more job postings," his mom nodded, her eyes softening. "You'll find something, I know you will." Jaden took a deep breath, giving her a small nod before grabbing his backpack and heading out the door. The library wasn't far, just a few blocks away. He liked going there in the morning when it was still quiet. It gave him some space to think, and there was always something calming about the rows of books, the dim lights, and the sound of pages. Turning, the librarian nodded at him as he walked in. She was used to seeing him there, always sitting at the same computer in the corner. He made his way over, dropping his bag on the floor and pulling out the old wooden chair. He logged on his fingers, tapping the keys with a sense of determination. He pulled up the job listings, scrolling through endless pages of positions. He knew he wouldn't get. He tried not to focus on how many times he had read the word. Experience required or college degree preferred, he just kept scrolling, hoping something would pop up after an hour. He sat back, rubbing his eyes. Nothing. Nothing that fit what he needed anyway. He let out a long breath, his eyes drifting to the window. That's when he saw a black executive car, the kind with dark tinted windows, pulling up in front of his house. Jaden's stomach dropped. "What the?" he whispered, his heart picking up speed. He grabbed his bag and hurried out of the library, his footsteps pounding against the sidewalk. As he made his way back home, thoughts raced through his head. Was it about the medical bills? Had something happened to his mom? He pushed the thoughts away, trying to keep himself calm as he turned the corner and saw the car still parked there. A man in a suit stood beside it, his eyes scanning the street. Jaden's chest tightened. The man looked out of place here, standing in front of their small rundown house with a car that probably cost more than everything they owned. Jaden slowed down as he approached, his eyes locking with the man's. "Can I help you?" Jaden asked, his voice wary. The man turned to him, a polite but unreadable smile on his face. "Are you Jaden?" he asked. Jaden nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing. "Yeah, who's asking?" The man held out an envelope, his posture straight and professional. "This is for you from Mr. Thompson. He wanted to express his gratitude for your assistance." Yesterday, Jaden blinked, stunned. He took the envelope, his fingers brushing against the crisp paper. "Mr. Thompson, the old man from the station," the driver nodded. "Yes, he wanted to make sure you received this personally." Jaden stared. At the envelope, his mind racing. He could feel his hands trembling slightly as he tore it open, pulling out a neatly folded letter. His eyes scanned the words, his breath catching in his throat. "Dear Jaden, your kindness yesterday did not go unnoticed. I was incredibly moved by your willingness to help me. Despite the personal cost it may have brought you, I would like to offer you an opportunity, an internship position at a company I am closely associated with. You may not know it, but I once led a major firm, and I see in you the kind of potential that deserves nurturing. The driver will be available to take you to the office tomorrow morning at 1000. And if you accept this offer, please think it over. Warm regards, R. Thompson." Jaden's mouth went dry. He stared at the letter, reading it again, and then once more, just to be sure. An internship. He could barely believe it. He looked up at the driver, his expression a mix of confusion and disbelief. "Is this for real?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The driver smiled, a hint of warmth reaching his eyes. "Mr. Thompson doesn't make empty offers, young man. He was quite insistent that you consider it seriously." Jaden nodded, the words still not fully sinking in. An internship, him. It seemed impossible. He could barely catch his breath as he looked back at his house, then at the driver. "Okay," he said, finally managing to find his voice. I'll do it." The driver nodded, reaching out to shake Jaden's hand. "Good decision. Be ready at 1000. I'm sharp tomorrow." "I'll be here." Jaden shook his hand, feeling the firm grip. "Thank you," he said, his voice still shaky. "Thank Mr. Thompson." "For me too." The driver gave a curt nod before getting back into the car. Jaden watched as it pulled away, disappearing around the corner. He stood there for a moment, the letter still in his hands before. Finally, turning and heading inside, he found his mom sitting up in bed, her eyes lighting up when she saw him. "Jay, you're back? What happened?" Jaden took a deep breath, his hands still trembling slightly. As he showed her the letter, "Mom, you're not going to believe this. Remember the man I helped yesterday? He's offering me an internship." Her eyes widened and she looked up at him, tears already welling in her eyes. "Oh, Jaden, I knew it. I knew good things would come to you for helping others." Jaden swallowed hard, trying to fight back the emotions building in his chest. "Yeah, Mom, maybe you were right." He sat beside her, the two of them holding each other, and for the first time in a long while, the future didn't seem so uncertain. Maybe, just maybe, things were finally turning around. Jaden woke up before the sun had even risen, the reality of what had happened. The day before still hadn't fully sunk in, and he lay in bed for a while, staring at the ceiling. He kept replaying the scene in his mind, the black car, the driver, the letter. It felt surreal, like it was happening to someone else, not him. Eventually, he forced himself out of bed. He needed to be ready, needed to look his best. He went to the small bathroom, splashing cold water on his face, trying to shake off the nervousness that was creeping up. He looked at his reflection in the cracked mirror. He didn't look any different, just the same kid with tired eyes and a worn-out expression. His mom was already awake. When he walked into her room, she gave him a soft smile, her eyes full of pride. "Today's the big day, huh?" she said, her voice gentle. Jaden nodded, trying to return the smile. "Yeah, I'm nervous," though she reached out, taking his hand. "You're gonna do great. Jay, just be yourself. That's what got you here. Remember, you're a good person, and people notice." That Jaden swallowed his throat, feeling tight. "Thanks, Mom. I want to make you proud." She squeezed his hand, her eyes welling up. "You already have." He stayed with her, a while helping her get comfortable before heading to the kitchen to make something to eat. His hands shook slightly as he made himself a small breakfast, his mind running in circles. What if this was some kind of mistake? What if he got there and they realized he wasn't what they wanted? The thought made his stomach churn, but he pushed it away. He had to at least try. He owed that much to himself and to his mom. The clock ticked slowly, each minute feeling like an eternity. He put on his best clothes, a simple button-up shirt and some slacks that were a little too short at the ankles. He brushed his hair, trying to make it lie flat, but it refused to cooperate. He sighed, giving up. Finally, 10 a.m. approached. He heard the car pull up outside, and his heart skipped a beat. He took a deep breath, glancing at his mom. She smiled at him, nodding. "Go get him, Jay." He nodded back, then walked out the door. The black car was parked at the curb, the driver standing beside it, just as professional looking as the day before he opened the door for Jaden. And Jaden swallowed hard, sliding into the back seat. The drive was quiet. Jaden looked out the window, watching the city pass by. He felt out of place in the luxury car, his hands resting awkwardly on his lap. It was strange being in something so sleek, so expensive. It was like he had stepped into another world. The car pulled up in front of a tall office building, the kind that made Jaden feel even smaller. The driver stepped out, opening the door for him again. "Good luck." The driver said, his voice neutral, but not unkind. Jaden nodded, stepping out, his legs feeling shaky. He looked up at the building, the glass reflecting the bright morning sun. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He could do this. He had to do this. He walked through the front doors, his shoes echoing on the polished floor. The receptionist glanced up, giving him a polite smile. "You must be Jaden," she said, her voice warm. "Mr. Thompson is expecting you. Go ahead." Up to the 12th floor, Jaden nodded, managing a small smile in return. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. He made his way to the elevator, pressing the button and waiting as the doors slid open. He stepped in, feeling the cool air conditioning wash over him. The elevator ride felt like an eternity. He watched the numbers climb, his heartbeat matching each floor. When it finally reached 12, the doors slid open and Jaden stepped out. The hallway was quiet, the walls lined with sleek photographs of cityscapes and buildings. He walked forward, his footsteps almost silent on the carpeted floor. At the end of the hallway, there was a large door with Mr. Thompson's name etched onto a poish name plate. Jaden took a deep breath, then knocked softly. "Come in," a voice called from the other side. Jaden pushed the door open. Stepping inside, Mr. Thompson sat behind a large wooden desk, his glasses perched on the end of his nose. He looked up, a warm smile spreading across his face when he saw Jaden. "Ah, Jaden, I'm glad you came," Mr. Thompson said, standing up and extending his hand. Jaden walked forward, shaking Mr. Thompson's hand, his own still trembling slightly. "Thank you for inviting me, sir," he said. Mr. Thompson gestured to one of the chairs in front of his desk. "Please sit down. We have much to discuss." Jaden sat his back straight, his eyes fixed on Mr. Thompson. He didn't know what to expect. Maybe some kind of interview, maybe just a conversation to see if he was worth the opportunity. Mr. Thompson sat down, folding his hands on the desk. He studied Jaden for a moment, then smiled again. "I must say, Jaden, what you did yesterday was truly remarkable in a world where so many people are too busy to care about others. You took the time to help someone in need. That says a lot about your character." Jaden shifted slightly in his seat, his face warming. It was just the right thing to do. "I didn't think much of it," Mr. Thompson nodded, "and that's exactly why it's so meaningful. People who do good without expecting anything in return are the kind of people we need more of, both in this company and in the world." Jaden swallowed his throat, feeling dry. "Thank you, sir. I appreciate that." Mr. Thompson leaned back in his chair, his eyes still on Jaden. "I'd like to offer you an internship here, Jaden. It won't be glamorous work. You'll be doing a lot of learning, a lot of running around, but it's an opportunity. You'll get a chance to see how things work, to learn about the business world, and in time, you may even find a place here." Jaden's eyes widened, his heart pounding. He could barely believe what he was hearing. An internship, an actual chance. He nodded, his voice almost breaking. "I'd love that, sir. Thank you. I won't let you down." Mr. Thompson smiled, standing up. "I know you won't, Jaden. Now let me introduce you to some of the team. You'll be working closely with a few people who will help guide you." Jaden stood up, following Mr. Thompson out of the office. His mind was reeling, his steps almost automatic as they walked down the hallway. Mr. Thompson pointed out different offices, introducing Jaden to several people who gave him polite nods and smiles. Jaden tried to remember names, but everything felt like a blur. Eventually, they stopped in front of a small office. A young woman sat behind a desk, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Mr. Thompson knocked lightly on the door frame, and she looked up, smiling. "Jaden, this is Clara. She'll be your point of contact for most things around here." "Clara, this is Jaden, our newest intern." Clara smiled, standing up and extending her hand. "Welcome aboard, Jaden. It's good to meet you." Jaden shook her hand, managing a small smile. "Thanks. It's good to be here." Mr. Thompson patted Jaden on the shoulder. "Clara will get you set up if you need anything. Don't hesitate to ask." Jaden nodded, watching as Mr. Thompson walked away. Clara gestured for him to sit down. She pulled out a few papers, her smile friendly. "All right, Jaden, let's get you started. There's a lot to learn, but don't worry, we'll take it one step at a time." "You ready?" Jaden took a deep breath, nodding. "Yeah, I'm ready." And for the first time in what felt like forever, he really was. Jaden sat at the small desk Clara had assigned to him. It wasn't much, just a simple desk with an outdated computer, a few empty shelves, and a stack of paperwork that made his eyes widen still to Jaden. It felt like a glimpse into a world he'd only dreamed of. He reached out, brushing his fingers against the cool metal surface of the desk, almost as if he was trying to make sure it was real. Clara walked in her heels, clicking softly, on the carpeted floor. She handed Jaden a pile of folders, her smile warm but businesslike. "All right, Jaden, we're going to start you off easy. This is mostly data entry, organizing some reports, and getting familiar with the basics of our client information system. Think you can handle it?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Jaden nodded quickly, his eyes moving from the folders to Clara's face. "Yeah, I can do it. Thanks for trusting me with it." Clara smiled, patting the top of the desk. "Good attitude. Just ask if you need anything. All right, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Everyone's got to start somewhere with that." She turned and left the room. Her confidence in him, making Jaden's shoulders straighten slightly, Jaden opened the first folder, staring at the pages. A series of numbers and codes filled the sheet's columns of information that seemed to blur together. At first glance, he let out a small breath, adjusting his chair and setting his focus. He'd start slow, just like Mr. Thompson said he was here to learn. He began typing each keystroke, feeling deliberate and careful. The work wasn't glamorous, but he felt something shift in him. A small sense of pride that he was doing this. He wasn't sweeping floors. He wasn't stocking shelves. He was here in an office wearing clothes that made him feel like he belonged, even if he wasn't quite there. Yet hours passed and Jaden got into a rhythm. The click of keys filled his small space, punctuated only by Clara, occasionally popping in to check on him. She would nod approvingly when she saw how much he'd completed, offering small tips and encouragement by the time noon rolled around. Jaden's stomach was growling. He looked around, realizing he hadn't brought anything for lunch. He didn't want to leave. He wanted to stay, to keep working to prove he belonged here, but Clara soon appeared, poking her head into the room. "Hey, Jaden, it's lunchtime. You should take a break. There's a nice little sandwich shop just down the street," she said, nodding towards the hallway. Jaden hesitated, glancing at the folders. "I'm not sure I could keep going. I don't want to waste time." Clara chuckled, crossing her arms. "Trust me, everyone here takes a lunch break. You're not wasting time. Go on, take a walk. It'll help you reset, plus you'll need your energy for the rest of the day," Jaden finally nodded, standing up. "Okay, yeah, thanks, Clara." She smiled, nodding towards the door. "Don't mention it. Go on, grab something good." Jaden grabbed his worn-out backpack and made his way out of the office. The elevator ride down felt like a pause, a moment for him to breathe. The office was a different world, busy, bright, filled with people who all seemed like they belonged there out here. On the street, Jaden felt more like himself again, a little less confident, but still determined. He found the sandwich shop. Clara mentioned a small, cozy place that smelled of freshly baked bread. He stood in line watching as people ordered, their conversations drifting around him when it was his turn. He ordered a simple turkey sandwich and a bottle of water, trying not to look at the higher prices of the fancier items. He took his sandwich to a small table by the window, sitting down and watching the world pass by. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and he pulled it out, smiling when he saw his mom's name pop up. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice soft. "Hey, Jay, how's it going? How's your first day?" She asked, her voice filled with curiosity. Jaden smiled, taking a small bite of his sandwich. "It's good. It's a lot of work, mostly just entering data and stuff like that. But it feels different. Like I'm actually doing something." His mom let out a small, happy sigh. "That's wonderful, Jay. I'm so proud of you. I knew you could do it." Jaden swallowed hard, feeling a lump in his throat. He didn't want to let her down. "Thanks, Mom. I'm trying my best." "How are you feeling today?" She hesitated, her voice dropping 8-bit. "I'm okay, Jay, just tired. But that's nothing new. Don't you worry about me. Focus on your day." "All right. This is about you," Jaden nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "All right. Mom'll call you when I get home." Okay, Jay? I love you, honey. Keep your head up. Love." "You too, Mom." Jaden said, ending the call and slipping his phone back into his pocket. He took another bite of his sandwich, staring out the window. For once, he didn't feel like a failure. He didn't feel like he was falling behind. He was here, and he was making it work when he got back to the office. He found Clara waiting for him, a stack of papers in her arms. She smiled when she saw him. "Hope you had a good break. I've got a bit more for you to work on this afternoon. We're going to start getting you familiar with the different projects we've got going on here." Jaden nodded, taking the papers from her. "Sounds good." "I'm ready." Clara grinned. "That's the spirit. You keep this up and you'll fit right in here." In no time, Jaden returned to his desk, feeling a strange mix of nervousness and excitement. He opened up the folders Clara had given him, his eyes scanning over the information. It was more complicated than what he'd done earlier. Chart summaries, project outlines that he couldn't quite make sense of. He took a deep breath, deciding to tackle it one piece at a time. The hours flew by. Jaden's focus was unbroken, his fingers moving across the keys, the room around him falling into the background. Occasionally, Clara would come by to check in her feedback. Always direct, but encouraging. Jaden made mistakes more than a few. But Clara just nodded, pointing them out without making him feel like a fool. As the day began to wind down, Mr. Thompson walked in. "Jaden." You looked up, his heart giving a small jolt. Mr. Thompson smiled, walking over and leaning slightly on the edge of Jaden's desk. "How's it going, Jaden?" he asked, his voice warm. Jaden straightened in his chair, nodding. It's good, sir. I'm learning a lot. Mr. Thompson looked at the open files on Jaden's desk, nodding approvingly. I'm glad to hear it. Clara tells me you're catching on quickly. That's exactly what I hoped for. Jaden smiled, a mix of pride and relief washing over him. I'm doing my best, sir. Mr. Thompson patted him on the shoulder. That's all anyone can ask. Keep at it. Jaden, I've got a good feeling about you. Jaden watched as Mr. Thompson left the room, his words echoing in Jaden's head. He felt something shift inside him, something that made the uncertainty of his future feel a little less daunting. Clara came by again. As the day was ending, her smile still as warm as when she first met him. You did good today. Jaden, get some rest tonight. Tomorrow's a new day, and there's plenty more to learn. Jaden nodded, packing up his things. Thanks, Clara. I will. He walked out of the office, the sun setting as he stepped back onto the street. The ride home was quiet, and when he walked into his house, his mom's tired smile was there to greet him. He hugged her, holding on for a moment longer than usual. For the first time, Jaden felt like the future was starting to take shape, not as something distant and out of reach, but as something real, something he could actually touch. Jaden stood outside his house the next morning, watching as the executive car pulled up. Just as it had the day before, he had that same knot in his stomach, nervousness mixed with excitement. This was his new reality now, and it still felt strange to think about it. He could hardly believe that yesterday had gone as well as it did, but there was no time to dwell on it. Today was another day, and he needed to be ready. The driver greeted him with a simple nod as Jadon climbed into the back seat. The ride was quiet, and Jaden found himself staring out the window, watching the familiar streets of his neighborhood pass by, gradually replaced by the polished, bustling parts of the city. He leaned back in his seat, trying to take deep breaths, reminding himself that he belonged here. He'd earned this chance when they reached the office. Jaden stepped out, adjusting his shirt and tugging the sleeves of his slightly short jacket. He kept his head high as he walked through the automatic doors, past the bustling reception area. People were coming and going, talking their movements. Confident, and Jaden swallowed the lump in his throat. He wanted to be like them, comfortable, assured. He headed to his small office, sitting at his desk and setting his bag down before he even had a chance to settle. Clara appeared, her cheerful smile brightening the room she handed him. Another stack of folders already filled to the brim with reports and spreadsheets. Morning. Jaden, you ready for another day of fun? She teased, her eyes. Twinkling, Jaden gave her a lopsided smile, even as he eyed the stack warily. Yeah. I guess you could say that this looks like more than yesterday. Clara laughed. Oh, it definitely is. But you did great yesterday, so I figured we'd push you a little today. You're not scared of a challenge. Right, Jaden shook his head. No, not at all. I'm ready for whatever good answer, she said, patting the folders. This is all about familiarizing yourself with ongoing projects. Just take it step by step, and remember, you can always ask if you get lost. Jaden nodded. Got it, thanks, Clara. She gave him a thumbs up before heading out, and Jaden turned his attention to the pile in front of him. He opened the first folder, his eyes scanning the content, graphs, charts, pages of typed notes. It was overwhelming, but he wasn't about to back down. He took a deep breath, picked up a pen, and started making notes. The hours ticked by. Slowly, Jaden losing himself in the work. The more he read, the more he realized just how little he understood about the corporate world. There were acronyms he didn't know, phrases that meant nothing to him. He frowned, chewing on the end of his pen as he stared at a particularly confusing report. His eyes were starting to blur, the words blending together. He let out a sigh, leaning back in his chair and rubbing his eyes. He didn't want to mess this up. He wanted to prove that he belonged here, that Mr. Thompson hadn't made a mistake in giving him a chance. He glanced at the clock. 11:45 a.m., almost lunchtime. He decided he'd make it through this report before he took a break. He picked up the paper again, squinting at the page, just as he was getting back into it. There was a knock on his door, and Clara peeked in. Hey, Jaden. You free for a quick meeting? Jaden blinked, his stomach twisting. A meeting already? He nodded, standing up and trying to keep his nerves from showing. Yeah, sure. She smiled. Great. Follow me. Jaden followed her down the hallway, his heart pounding, a bit harder with every step. Clara led him into a small conference room where two other people were seated. They both looked up when he walked in, a man and a woman, both in their 30s, dressed in sharp suits. They gave him polite smiles as Clara gestured to a chair. Jaden meet Matt and Olivia. They're leading a few of the projects you'll be learning about, Clara said as she sat down. Jaden shook both of their hands, his palms slightly clammy. Nice to meet you both, he said, trying to sound confident. Likewise, Matt said, leaning back in his chair. We've heard good things about you already. Jaden, Clara tells us, you've got a great attitude. Jaden smiled, feeling a bit of the tension in his chest. Loosen, I'm just happy to be here trying to learn as much as I can, Olivia nodded. Her gaze warm. That's exactly what we like to hear today. We're going to go over some of the basics of the client onboarding process. Clara thought it would be good for you to get a feel for how we interact with our clients and the kind of data we handle. Jaden nodded, leaning forward. Yeah, that sounds good. I'm ready. Clara gave him a reassuring smile before Matt began. Outlining the onboarding steps, Jaden listened intently, his pen moving quickly across his notepad. It was a lot to take in, more than he'd expected. The terms they used, the systems they referenced. It all felt like another language. He kept scribbling notes, hoping it would all start to make sense if he kept at it. After about 30 minutes, the meeting wrapped up and Clara stood, giving Jaden a nod. Nice work, Jaden. It's a lot to take in, but you're doing great, Jaden smiled, feeling a small swell of pride. Thanks, Clara. I'll keep working on it. Matt gave him a pat on the back as they walked out. You're on the right track. Jaden, it takes time, but don't let that discourage you. Jaden nodded, the encouragement making his steps a little lighter. Thanks. I appreciate it, as they all parted ways. Jaden made his way back to his desk, his head buzzing with new information. He sat down, glancing at his notes. It was overwhelming, sure, but he could do this. He had to. He wanted to prove not just to Mr. Thompson or Clara, but to himself that he could fit into this world. Lunchtime rolled around, and Jaden took Clara's advice again, heading back to the sandwich shop. He ordered the same turkey sandwich as before, feeling more at ease than the previous day. He even exchanged a few words with the cashier, their small talk, making him feel a bit more at home. He returned to his desk afterward, getting back to work with a renewed sense of determination. He tackled the reports, reading each line carefully, making notes, cross-referencing with what Matt and Olivia had told him. The more he worked, the more the pieces started to fall into place. It wasn't easy, but he could feel himself starting to understand slowly, but surely, as the afternoon wore on. Clara checked in again, her smile as bright as ever. She looked over his notes, nodding approvingly. You've made a lot of progress today. Jaden, you should be proud of yourself. Jaden smiled, a genuine one. This time, thanks, Clara. I'm trying, she nodded. I can see that. Keep it up. It only gets easier from here. Jaden worked until the end of the day, losing himself in the flow of information. He didn't even realize how late it was until the office started to empty out, people heading home. He glanced at the clock. 5:15 p.m. He stood, stretching his back, aching from sitting for so long. He packed up his things, feeling exhausted, but accomplished. As he stepped out of the building, the cool evening air hit his face, and he closed his eyes for a moment, taking it in. He felt lighter, like maybe things were finally moving in the right direction. The ride home was quiet, the driver giving him a nod as Jaden thanked him before stepping out of the car. He walked into the house, finding his mom sitting up waiting for him. Her face brightened when she saw him. Hey Jay, how was today? She asked, her voice eager. Jaden smiled, sitting down beside her. It was good, Mom. I learned a lot. They're giving me real responsibilities. She reached out, taking his hand. I'm so proud of you. Jay, you're doing amazing. Jaden squeezed her hand, his heart swelling with emotion. Thanks, Mom. I'm just taking it one day at a time. She nodded, her eyes shining. That's all you can do, Jay. And you're doing it so well. Jaden stayed with her, telling her about his day. The people he'd met, the work he was doing. It wasn't much, but it was a start. And for now, that was enough. Jaden woke up feeling a mix of exhaustion and excitement. The past 2 days at the office had been a whirlwind, but they'd also given him a sense of purpose that he hadn't felt in a long time. As he got ready that morning, He felt the pressure of expectation pressing on him, but also a determination to keep up. Pushing forward, he wanted to make his mom proud and to show himself that he could fit into this new world. He peeked into his mother's room before heading out. She was awake, propped up on a few pillows, her eyes catching the morning, sunlight streaming through the window. She smiled when she saw Jade in her face. Looking a bit less tired than usual. "Morning, Jay," she said, her voice. "Soft morning," Mom Jaden replied, stepping into the room. "You look better today." She nodded, her smile widening a bit. "Yeah, I'm feeling a little stronger. It's been a good few days. I think knowing you're doing well out there is helping me too." Jaden swallowed the lump in his throat growing. He knelt beside the bed, taking her hand gently. "I'm doing all of this for you, Mom. You know that, right?" She nodded, her eyes misty. "I know, Jay, but I want you to do it for yourself too. You deserve to have a good life." Jaden squeezed her hand, his heart heavy with emotions. "I know, Mom. I'm trying." She gave him a soft, encouraging smile. "That's all I asked. Jay, just keep trying." Jaden left the house, his mom's words echoing in his mind as he stepped into the waiting car. The ride to the office felt more familiar now, the anxiety that once accompanied him slowly giving way to something closer to confidence. He could feel the change within himself, small but undeniable. When he got to the office, Clara greeted him with a bright smile. "Morning, Jaden, ready for another day?" Jaden nodded, smiling back. "Definitely. What do we have today, Clara?" Led him to his desk, her hands full of folders as usual. "Today's a bit of a mixed bag. We're going to start you on some client research, basic stuff, but important. We need to understand our clients inside out, if we're going to serve them." "Well," Jaden took the folders from her, nodding. "Got it, I'm ready." The day was a blur of paperwork, research, and learning. Clara guided him through each step. Explaining patiently, when Jaden stumbled or had questions, she was kind but direct, pushing him to do better, while always making sure he understood why something was important. It wasn't until around noon that Clara approached his desk with a smile that was a bit different, less professional and more personal. She held out a small envelope and Jaden took it, looking at her with a puzzled expression. "What's this?" Jaden asked, raising an eyebrow. Clara smiled. "Mr. Thompson wanted me to give you this. It's a little something for you and your mom." Jaden's chest tightened, his fingers fumbling as he opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note, along with a small, neatly folded check. Jaden's eyes widened as he saw the amount enough to cover a good portion of his mom's medical bills. The note read, "Jaden, I wanted to express my gratitude once more for what you did for me. Use this expression to help your mother get the care she needs. I believe in you, and I want to see you succeed without the burden of worrying about her health." R. Thompson. Jaden swallowed hard, his vision blurring slightly. He looked up at Clara, who was watching him with a gentle expression. "Is this real, Jay?" Jen whispered, barely able to find his voice. Clara nodded, her smile widening. "It's real, Jaden. Mr. Thompson doesn't do things halfway. He sees potential in you and he wants you to succeed." Jaden's heart pounded, emotions crashing over him in waves, relief, gratitude, disbelief. He closed the envelope carefully, his hands trembling. "I don't even know what to say." Clara reached out, resting a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to say anything. Just keep working hard. You deserve this, Jaden. We all believe in you." Jaden nodded, blinking rapidly. He stood, feeling a surge of energy that he hadn't felt before. "I think I need to go. Make a quick call." Clara smiled. "Go ahead. Take your time." Jaden walked out of the office, his steps quickening as he found a quiet corner near the elevators. He pulled out his phone, dialing his mom's number with shaky fingers. She answered after a couple of rings, her voice sounding more alert than usual. "Hey, Jaden, everything okay?" She asked, concern evident in her tone. Jaden took a deep breath, trying to keep his voice. "Steady, Mom, you're not going to believe this, Mr. Thompson. He gave us some money enough to help with your treatments." There was silence on the other end for a moment, and then he heard her breath hitch. "Jay, are you serious?" Jaden nodded, though she couldn't see it. "Yeah, Mom? I have the check right here. You're going to get the care you need." She let out a shaky breath, her voice breaking. "Oh, Jaden, I don't even know what to say. This is incredible." Jaden felt his own eyes welling up. "I know, Mom. It's going to be okay. We're going to be okay." She sniffled, her voice filled with emotion. "I'm so proud of you." Jay, you've worked so hard for this. You deserve every bit of it. Jaden smiled, a tear slipping down his cheek. Thanks, Mom. I'm just glad I can help you now. I'm going to keep working hard. I promise. They stayed on the line for a few moments, longer, exchanging quiet words of love and hope when Jaden finally hung up. He took a deep breath, wiping his face with his sleeve. He had a renewed sense of purpose now, something more than just getting through each day. He was building something not just for himself, but for his mom, for their future. When he returned to his desk, Clara gave him a questioning look, her eyes. Soft, Jaden gave her a nod and a grateful smile. Thank you, he said, his voice still a bit thick with emotion. Thank you for everything. Clara smiled, patting his shoulder. You've earned it, Jaden. Now let's get back to work. The rest of the day flew by, Jaden working with a new fire inside him. He dived into the client research, putting his all into understanding each document, each piece of information. He wanted to make Mr. Thompson proud, to make Clara proud, and most importantly, to make his mom proud. As the day wound down, Clara approached his desk, leaning against the doorway with her arms crossed. You did really well today. Jaden, I'm impressed. Jaden looked up, a tired but genuine smile on his face. Thanks, Clara. I really appreciate you showing me the ropes, she grinned. No problem. I'm happy to help. You're picking it up faster than I did when I started that. That's for sure. Jaden laughed, shaking his head. I doubt that. Clara pushed off the doorframe, nodding towards the elevator. You should head home. Get some rest. We've got a lot more to do tomorrow. Jaden stood gathering his things. All right, thanks again. Clara, anytime, Jaden. See you tomorrow. Jaden walked out of the office. The weight of the day settling in as he rode the elevator down the ride home felt different, now less like he was being fed to a world he didn't belong in, and more like he was on his way to something he could really be a part of when he got home. His mom was waiting for him, her eyes red from crying, but her face glowing with happiness. Jaden hugged her, holding her close as she whispered her gratitude over and over. He knew that this was just the beginning, but it was a beginning that finally felt like it was leading somewhere good. He sat with her that night, talking about the future, about the treatment she would get, about what his job could mean for both of them. It was the first time in a long while that they talked about the future without feeling scared, without feeling like it was something to dread. And for Jaden, that was everything. He went to bed that night with a full heart, knowing that whatever came next, he was ready for it. Jaden woke up early, the familiar glow of the morning sun streaming through his curtains, but today felt different. There was no anxious weight pressing on his chest, no panic over missed opportunities, no heavy burden of uncertainty about whether or not his mother could get the care she needed. Today, Jaden woke up with a sense of hope that hadn't been there for a long time. He quickly got ready, pulling on the best clothes he had. They were the same slacks and button-up shirt he had been wearing all week, but today they felt more comfortable, like a second skin. Instead of a disguise, he looked at his reflection, and for the first time in a while, he saw someone who was growing into something better. He ran a hand through his hair, brushing it back, and took a deep breath. He had a purpose, and he was going to live up to it. His mom was awake when he walked into her room, her eyes bright, despite the fatigue etched across her features. She smiled at him. Her expression warmed her pride. Unmistakable. Morning, Jay. She said, her voice still weak, but the warmth made up for it. Morning, Mom, Jaden replied, leaning down to give her a gentle hug. How are you feeling? She sighed, looking up at him better. Knowing you're out there doing what you're meant to do. I'm so proud of you, Jay. I hope you know that. Jaden nodded, his throat tightening. He swallowed and gave her a smile. I do, Mom, and I'm going to keep making you proud. She squeezed his hand, and for a moment, Jaden stood there just holding on to her. Then he straightened, glancing at the clock. I should get going. I don't want to be late. She nodded. Go on, Jay. You go. Do your best. Jaden gave her one more smile before grabbing his bag and heading out. The car was already waiting for him, and as Jaden stepped in, he greeted the driver with a nod. The ride to the office felt more familiar now. The route etched into his memory. Jaden leaned back, watching the city pass by, the buildings and streets, waking up with the morning sun. This was his world now, at least for the time being. and he was determined to make the most of it when he arrived at the office. Clara was already there waiting for him by his desk. She smiled when she saw him handing him a stack of folders. Morning. Jaden ready for another big day. Jaden smiled, taking the folders. Morning, Clara. You know I am. What's on the agenda? Clara grinned, tapping one of the folders. We've got a client visit today. Mr. Thompson wants you to sit in. He thinks it'll be good for you to see how we handle face-to-face meetings. Jaden's eyes widened. A client meeting, really? Clara nodded. Yep, just stick close to me. Take some notes and listen in. You'll do great. Jaden swallowed, nodding. He could feel the nerves bubbling up, but he pushed them down. This was another chance, another opportunity to learn to prove himself. He wasn't going to let it slip. By the morning passed quickly. Jaden diving into the work Clara had given him. The client meeting was scheduled for the early afternoon, and as the time approached, Jaden could feel the anticipation building. Clara had told him. It was a major client, one of the company's biggest accounts, and Jaden felt the weight of the situation, but he was ready when the time finally came. Clara appeared at his desk, giving him a reassuring smile. Come on, Jaden, let's head over to the conference room. Jaden stood grabbing his notebook and pen and followed Clara down the hallway. They reached the conference room and Jaden hesitated for a moment before. Stepping inside, Mr. Thompson was already there, standing by the window, and he gave Jaden a warm smile when he walked in. Jaden, glad you could join us. Mr. Thompson said, his voice friendly. Thank you for letting me sit in, sir. Jaden replied, trying to keep his voice steady. Mr. Thompson nodded, gesturing to a seat. You've earned it. Jaden, just observe today, take notes, and we'll discuss it. Afterward, Jaden nodded, sitting down beside Clara. The client arrived shortly after, a man in his 50s, dressed sharply with an air of confidence. The meeting began, and Jaden listened intently as Mr. Thompson and Clara spoke, outlining strategies, discussing metrics, and making recommendations. Jaden took careful notes, his pen moving quickly across the page. It was a different kind of experience, seeing how the people in this world talked, the way they negotiated, how they presented themselves. Jaden could feel his own aspirations growing as he watched, imagining himself in their shoes one day. It wasn't just about the work. It was about understanding how to navigate this new world, how to stand out, how to make an impact. The meeting wrapped up smoothly, and the client left with a satisfied smile. Mr. Thompson turned to Jaden, his eyes warm. Well, Jaden, what did you think? Mr. Thompson asked. Jaden hesitated for a moment, gathering his thoughts. It was really interesting. Sir, seeing how you handled everything. I've read about these kinds of meetings, but seeing it in person is different. I learned a lot. Mr. Thompson smiled, nodding. I'm glad to hear that you did well. Jaden kept your focus, took notes, paid attention. That's exactly what I wanted. Clara patted Jaden on the shoulder, giving him a proud smile. See, you're doing great, Jaden smiled, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. Thank you. I'm just glad I can be here. Mr. Thompson nodded, his expression serious. And we're glad to have you. Jaden, keep up the hard work you're going. Places. The rest of the day passed by quickly, the work flowing easily. Now that Jaden felt more comfortable in his role, Clara continued to guide him, giving him new tasks and challenges, each one pushing him just a bit further. Jaden embraced each one, eager to prove himself, eager to learn. As the day wound down, Clara approached his desk. Her smile, warm. You did really well today, Jaden. I think you're starting to find your stride. Jaden looked up, his face lighting up. Thanks, Clara. It feels like things are starting to make sense. Clara nodded. That's the way it goes. You keep at it, and eventually everything starts clicking. Just keep doing what you're doing. Jaden packed up his things, and as he walked out of the building, he felt a sense of fulfillment. That was entirely new to him. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about building something. It was about taking control of his life, one step at a time. When he got home, his mom was sitting up, a soft smile on her face as she watched him. Walk in, Jaden set his bag down and walked over to her, sitting beside her bed. Hey, Mom, he said, his voice filled with warmth. Hey, Jay, she replied, her eyes shining. How was your day? Jaden smiled, taking her hand. It was good, Mom. I got to sit in on a client meeting today. It was incredible. I learned so much. Her face lit up, her eyes welling with pride. Oh, Jay, I'm so proud of you. I knew you could do it. Jaden squeezed her hand gently. "Thanks, Mom. I'm doing this for us. I want you to be able to get better. I want us to have a future." She nodded, her voice thick with emotion. "And we will, Jay, because of you, you're making it happen." Jaden stayed with her, telling her all about his day, about the people he worked with, about Mr. Thompson and Clara, and about everything he was learning. His mom listened, her face filled with pride and hope, her smile never fading. When Jaden finally went to bed that night, he lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened. It had only been a few days, but it felt like his life had changed completely. He was no longer the kid struggling to find a way out. He was someone with purpose, someone with a future, and for the first time, Jaden didn't feel scared of what was to come. He felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, ready to keep pushing forward, ready to keep building the life he and his mom deserved. Because now Jaden knew he belonged. He wasn't just a kid from a rundown neighborhood with a sick mom and no prospects. He was Jaden, someone who had earned his place, someone who was going to make a difference. And as he drifted off to sleep, Jaden knew without a doubt that this was just the beginning.